The rain had been falling since before dawn, tapping softly against the rusted tin roof like thousands of tiny fingers trying to get inside. In the narrow alleyways of a crowded coastal town in the Philippines, puddles gathered between cracked concrete and uneven stones, reflecting the dull gray sky. Most people were still asleep, wrapped in thin blankets, dreaming of warmer places and better lives. But Mateo was already awake. He always woke before the sun. Not because he wanted to. Because hunger never slept. At 19 years old, Mateo had learned to live with the constant ache in his stomach. It was a familiar companion, one he had known since childhood. His family's small wooden house stood on stilts near the water's edge, surrounded by other homes that leaned and creaked like tired old men. His father had once been a fisherman, but years of storms and a bad injury had left him unable to work. His mother took in laundry and sometimes cleaned houses when she could find someone willing to pay. Money was never enough. Some days, there was rice. Some days, there was only water. Mateo did not complain. He rarely spoke at all. Words, he believed, were heavy. They carried expectations, and expectations led to disappointment. Silence felt safer. That morning, he slipped quietly from the thin mattress he shared with his younger brother, careful not to wake him. The boy was only 10, his face peaceful in sleep, unaware of how fragile their world truly was. Mateo stepped outside, the cool air biting at his bare skin. He pulled a worn hoodie tighter around himself and walked toward the shoreline. The ocean was his sanctuary. Whenever life became too loud, too painful, or too overwhelming, he came here. The waves never judged. They never laughed. They never asked why he was poor, or why his shoes had holes, or why he had dropped out of school. They simply existed. Mateo stood at the edge of the water, toes sinking into wet sand. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. And then, quietly, he sang. At first, it was just a low hum, barely louder than the wind. The sound vibrated in his chest, warm and steady. Slowly, he shaped the hum into a melody, one he had heard long ago on a neighbor's old radio. A song about longing, about hope, about love that never truly dies. His voice slid downward, deeper and deeper, until it felt like it was coming from somewhere far below his lungs, somewhere ancient and powerful. The sound was rich, dark, unbelievably deep. If anyone had been nearby, they would have stopped in their tracks. But no one was there. Mateo sang only for the sea. He had discovered his voice by accident years earlier. When he was 12, his mother used to sing while washing clothes. Her voice was soft and gentle, and though she was often exhausted, she sang with a smile. One evening, Mateo tried to imitate her, jokingly exaggerating how low he could go. The sound that came out shocked both of them. His mother dropped a wet shirt into the bucket and stared at him. Mateo froze. "Do that again," she whispered. He did. This time, he pushed his voice even lower. The small room seemed to vibrate. His mother's eyes filled with tears. "You have a gift," she said. Mateo didn't know what to say. No one had ever called anything about him a gift before. From that day on, his mother encouraged him to sing whenever he could. But Mateo was shy, painfully shy. The idea of singing in front of others made his chest tighten and his hands shake. So he kept his voice hidden. He sang while walking to collect scrap metal. He sang while helping his father mend broken nets. He sang to the ocean. He sang in the darkness when everyone else was asleep. Music became his secret world, a place where he could be more than just another poor boy in a forgotten town. As he grew older, his voice grew deeper. Much deeper. Sometimes, when he sang, he could feel the vibration in his bones, like something powerful was trying to break free. But he never imagined that anyone beyond his family would ever hear it. Until one afternoon changed everything. Mateo was at the local market, helping an elderly vendor carry heavy boxes in exchange for a small plate of leftover food. The market was loud and chaotic, filled with shouting, bargaining, and the constant buzz of conversation. As Mateo stacked boxes behind a stall, he absent-mindedly began to hum. Just a hum, low, steady. A woman selling vegetables paused mid-sentence. A man counting coins looked up. The elderly vendor turned slowly toward Mateo. "Son," the man said, eyes wide, "is that you?" Mateo stopped humming immediately, his face burning. "I'm sorry," he muttered. I didn't mean to. No, no, the man said, gripping Mateo's arm. Do it again. People nearby began to notice. Mateo wanted to disappear, but something in the old man's expression wasn't mocking. It was wonder. Mateo swallowed and hummed again. Then, hesitantly, he added a few words. His voice rolled out like distant thunder. The small crowd fell silent. A teenage boy pulled out his phone. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "That doesn't sound real." Mateo finished the short line and stopped, heart pounding. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the old vendor laughed softly. "My God," he said. "You sound like a giant hiding inside a skinny boy." A few people chuckled, not cruelly, in awe. The teenager with the phone stepped closer. "Can I record you?" he asked. Mateo shook his head immediately. "No, please." The boy hesitated. "Just 10 seconds. Mateo looked around. So many eyes, so many expectations. He wanted to run, but then he thought of his mother, washing clothes until her hands cracked. Of his father, staring at the sea with a look that said he felt useless. Of his brother, dreaming of becoming a teacher. Mateo took a deep breath. "Okay," he whispered. The boy hit record. Mateo sang. He sang a simple song his mother loved. He didn't try to be perfect. He didn't try to impress. He just sang. When he finished, the market exploded into noise. People clapped. Some cheered. Others just stared, shaking their heads in disbelief. The teenager stared at his phone screen like it was showing magic. "That's insane," he said. "I'm posting this." Mateo's stomach dropped. "Please don't," he begged. But the boy was already typing. "I won't use your name," he said. "I promise." Mateo went home that day with a small bag of rice the vendor had given him as thanks. He also went home with a knot of fear in his chest. He had no idea that within 24 hours, his life would begin to change. The video was only 25 seconds long. No fancy editing, no filters, just a skinny Filipino teenager standing behind a vegetable stall, singing in a voice that sounded impossibly deep. The boy posted it on social media with the caption, "This guy's voice gave me chills." By morning, the video had 10,000 views. By afternoon, 100,000. By night, it had crossed 1 million. Comments poured in from around the world. "Is this real? That voice sounds fake. I've never heard anything like this. Someone get this kid a recording contract." Mateo didn't know any of this. His family didn't own a smartphone. They didn't have internet. The next day, people began showing up at their house. At first, it was just a few curious neighbors. Then strangers. Then someone from a local radio station. Mateo stood behind his mother, terrified, as a well-dressed woman introduced herself. "We're looking for a young man named Mateo," she said. "We believe he has an extraordinary voice." Mateo felt dizzy. His mother looked at him. "Is this about your singing?" she asked quietly. Mateo nodded. The woman smiled warmly. "We'd love to record you for our station." Mateo wanted to say no. Every instinct in his body screamed no. But his mother gently squeezed his hand. "This could be something good," she whispered. That afternoon, Mateo sat in a small recording booth for the first time in his life. The microphone looked enormous. The headphones felt heavy. His hands shook so badly he had to sit on them. "Just sing like you do at home," the sound technician said kindly. Mateo closed his eyes. He imagined the ocean. He imagined the waves. He sang. When he finished, the technician slowly removed his headphones. "I've worked in music for 20 years, the man said. "I've never heard a voice like yours." The radio station aired Mateo's recording that evening. Phones rang non-stop. Local news stations picked up the story. Teen with unbelievably deep voice discovered in market. Within a week, Mateo had been invited to perform on a small regional talent show. The idea of standing on a stage in front of judges and cameras made him physically ill. He considered refusing, but then his father spoke. "I couldn't give you much in this life," he said, voice thick. "But maybe God gave you something special. Don't waste it." Mateo agreed. The talent show was held in a modest theater. Backstage, Mateo sat alone, knees bouncing. He could hear applause from the audience. He could hear someone singing high notes with confidence. Mateo felt completely out of place. A stage assistant called his name. Mateo stood. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He walked onto the stage. Bright lights blinded him. The judges smiled politely. "What's your name?" one asked. "Mateo," he said softly. "And what will you sing today?" Mateo hesitated. "A song my mother likes." "Good luck," the judge said. The music began. Mateo took a breath. He sang. Within seconds, the judges' smiles vanished. One judge's eyes widened. Another leaned forward. The audience grew silent. Mateo's voice filled the theater, deep and resonant, sliding effortlessly through notes most people didn't even know existed. When he finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the entire theater erupted. People stood. They screamed. They clapped. One judge wiped tears from her eyes. "That voice," she said. "That voice is a once-in-a-generation gift." Mateo received a standing ovation and advanced easily to the next round. Clips of his performance spread online. International music producers took notice. Some were skeptical. Others were fascinated. A few reached out. Mateo suddenly found himself traveling to Manila for meetings, something he had never imagined possible. The city felt like another planet. Tall buildings, bright lights, endless noise. He stayed in a small dorm provided by a local arts organization that wanted to help nurture his talent. For the first time in his life, he had regular meals. For the first time, he slept on a mattress that didn't sag. For the first time, he held a proper microphone designed for singing. But success did not come easily. Many producers wanted to change him. Sing higher. Try pop. Lose the accent. Be more flashy. Mateo tried, but it never felt right. One night, after a particularly frustrating session, Mateo sat alone in his room, staring at the floor. He felt like he was losing himself. He called his mother. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly. His mother listened. Then she said, "When you sang as a child, you sang because it made you feel alive. Not because anyone told you how to sound. Remember that." Mateo cried. The next day, he made a decision. He would sing in his own style. No imitating. No forcing. Just his natural voice. Some producers lost interest. Others became more intrigued. One producer in particular, an older man with decades of experience in classical and soul music, listened to Mateo sing a traditional Filipino song in his deep voice. When Mateo finished, the man sat in silence for a long time. "That voice," he said slowly, "sounds like it carries history. Pain, hope, strength. I don't want to change you. I want to showcase you." They began working together. Training was intense. Breathing techniques, vocal control, language coaching, performance skills. Mateo struggled at first. He had no formal education in music. He felt behind, but he worked harder than anyone. He practiced until his throat ached. He studied recordings of legendary singers. He learned how to protect his voice. Months passed. Then a year. Mateo recorded his first professional song. It was a simple ballad about longing for home. No heavy production. Just piano and voice. When it was released online, it didn't explode overnight. But it grew steadily. People shared it, reacted to it, cried to it. Music reactors on video platforms filmed themselves listening to Mateo for the first time. Many of them had the same reaction. Shock, goosebumps, silence, tears. "This doesn't sound human," one said. "I feel this in my soul," another whispered. Mateo's subscriber count climbed. His song reached millions of streams. He was invited to perform on a major televised singing competition as a special guest. This time, the stage was enormous. The audience was massive. Millions would be watching. Backstage, Mateo closed his eyes and took slow breaths. He thought of the ocean. He thought of the market. He thought of his mother's tired hands. He walked onto the stage. The lights dimmed. A single spotlight found him. The first note left his mouth. The audience gasped. By the time he reached the chorus, many people were crying openly. Judges stood before the song was even over. When he finished, the applause felt endless. Social media exploded. "Who is this guy? Best voice I've ever heard. Filipino singers are built different." International labels began competing for him. Mateo chose carefully. He signed a modest deal that allowed him creative control. He released an album. It debuted on multiple charts. He went on tour. For the first time in his life, he boarded an airplane. He performed in countries he had only seen on maps. Everywhere he went, people told him the same thing. Your voice gives me chills. Despite the success, Mateo remained humble. He sent most of his money home. His parents moved into a solid concrete house. His brother returned to school. Mateo funded scholarships in his hometown for kids who couldn't afford supplies. He never forgot where he came from. One evening, after a sold-out concert in a huge arena, Mateo returned alone to his hotel room. The noise of the crowd still echoed in his ears. He sat on the bed, suddenly feeling small. He opened his phone and watched the original market video. Grainy, shaky, 25 seconds. A scared boy singing behind a vegetable stall. Mateo smiled. Tears slipped down his cheeks. He thought about how close he had been to saying no. How close he had been to staying silent forever. The next morning, Mateo posted a message online. I was once too afraid to sing in front of anyone. If you have a gift, don't hide it. You never know who needs to hear it. Messages flooded in. People sharing their own fears. Their own dreams. Their own struggles. Mateo realized something important. His voice was not just about impressive low notes. It was about connection. It was about showing people that someone who came from nothing could become something. Years later, Mateo returned to his hometown for a special free concert. The stage was set up near the shoreline. The same ocean where he used to sing alone. Thousands of people gathered. Some recognized him. Some didn't. Mateo walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the water. For a moment, he wasn't a famous singer. He was just a boy again. He lifted the microphone. I used to come here when I was hungry, he said softly. I used to sing here because I didn't have anything else. This place saved me. Thank you for listening, he sang. The ocean waves moved gently. The crowd stood in silence. Mateo's deep voice rolled across the water, powerful and calm, carrying years of struggle, hope, and perseverance. In that moment, it didn't matter how many records he had sold. It didn't matter how famous he was. What mattered was that a boy who once had nothing had found his voice. And by sharing it, he had given the world chills. Not because his voice was deep, but because his story was deeper.